Alright, welcome back. So in this tutorial, we're just going to look at how to create like a basic shirt. In the startup menu, I'm just going to start from this male base. So I'm just going to double click that and open it up. Now there's lots of ways to create the starting point for a shirt, but I'm just going to show you the way that I typically do it. Well, I might show you both ways. Okay, so generally what you'll do is that you'll start from a pretty solid base. So this base male is pretty well thought out. So the basic structures are there to build on top of. So you don't really want to create the shirt where you're sort of thinking still about how this shape is going to look. Just the basic primary shapes of the model itself. You sort of want to be well within like the secondary shapes before you start doing this. So what we're going to do for this first example, I'm just going to show you the quicker way. This way I don't typically like to do because it's a little bit messier. It's a little bit harder to sort of predict what you're going to get. And I also want to let you know as well, I'm not someone that can make good shirts. I can do the starting point, but I typically don't spend a lot of time creating clothing for my sculptures. But yeah, regardless, this is generally the starting point. So what we need to do is just sort of mask out the general shape of our clothes that we're doing. So this is going to be like a t-shirt. So let's hold down Control and then mask out the parts that we're sort of looking for. Now, it doesn't need to be perfect. All we're really doing is just getting the general shape. So probably from here, like that. And I'll just get the other side as well. And from the back, I'll grab all of that. And this would be like the sleeves. Okay, so with that made, we can now just draw a mask from the outside. So we can draw like a square just to grab all these inside bits. Again, it doesn't need to be perfect, because it's not going to look like this anyways in the end. It's going to change a little bit. Right. But let's see, let's grab that. And that, okay. Areas like this, you probably, if you can, you probably do want to tidy up just a little bit. Okay, so this is the quick way of creating the base mesh for the shirt. So with that selection made, we can go down in our tools panel, and in the subtool palette, right at the bottom, we have extract. Now if I press that, I can sort of pick the thickness that I want. It's sort of hard to tell exactly how thick it's going to be, but if you press extract, it'll create this sort of extra piece for you to work with. Okay, you have to accept that. You can see that you got this extra piece. So this works fine. The problem is the getting the thickness, how thick that should be. There's a lot of sort of playing around getting that to sort of work. Now I'm going to delete that. So we're left back with this. And what I like to do is to just copy the mesh itself. So I'm just going to duplicate that. And it should still have its masking. And then I'm just going to hide the original. So this will be our sort of cutting mesh. Now if I press Shift F, it'll bring up the wireframes. And with this mask selected, what I can do is assign that a poly group. So I can do that by pressing Control W. You can see that's created another color for it. And a poly group is basically like a selection set. It allows us to quickly select the colors that are assigned to the polygons. And what's cool about this is that if I press Control Shift and tap on it, it will isolate that from the rest. Now I can go down to my geometry tab or geometry menu here, and then I need to delete the lowers, so I don't need any subdivision levels. So let's delete that. And then over here where it says modify topology, open that up, and then we can delete hidden. So we're sort of just left with this part here. So the next part is to clean this edges up. So they're a bit messy, and that's not going to work for a shirt unless it's like a sort of tattered shirt. And to make this process a little bit easier to look at, I'm just going to scroll all the way down in the tools panel, and right where it says display properties, I'm going to open that up and go to double. That just allows us to see the other side. It's still single-sided, so keep that in mind. Okay, so to clean up the edges, we can go to deformation. So that's still in the tools panel. And then we're looking for one of these sliders to work with. So the one that we're going to look for is polish by crisp edge. And what that will do, it will sort of smooth or polish the edges off. So I'm going to grab that slide all the way to the right. You can see that sort of smooth that off for us. We can go as much as we want, but it will sort of get to the point where it just won't do anything. Right. So what we need to do is retopologize. So right now it's too high poly to work with anyways. So let's just retopologize. So let's go to the geometry tab. And before I do that, I'm going to hold down Shift and open that tab up. Close any ones that are open. Open up ZRemesher. And if I hold down Shift and click on one of these menus, it can open up both at once. So we can sort of go half and adaptive. And then every time we do that, we want to slide this slider to the right. So polish crisp edge. So we just want to polish that edge up and then ZRemesh. So that's looking pretty good. Still high poly, so let's just go down a bit more. Polish crisp edge and then ZRemesh. And over time, you can see that we get a really nice sort of clean edge here. We can go as far as we want, but that's looking pretty good. Right? If you feel like you need to do a couple more polish by crisp edge, ZRemesh, then just do that. You can use same as well, same as, and adaptive turned on. So if you like the poly count and you feel like all you need to do is just smooth that edge off a little bit, then you can just polish crisp edge and same and adaptive ZRemesh. Great, so let's bring back our base model. So you can see that we have this shirt here. So right now it's sort of inside the mesh. We can spend some time just using the move tool to move that out, but that's going to take some time. So if we go back down to the deformation menus and we scroll down a little bit, you'll find a push slider somewhere, or inflate I think we're looking for. So right over here, just be careful with this. You only want to inflate this just a little bit. Just enough that it sort of pushes everything out. So nothing's sort of intersecting inside the other polygons. Great. So for the most part, that's pretty decent, right? It's still probably too much like the underlying mesh, and we can solve that just by doing a number of things to it. Right? So the first thing that we're going to do is run a dynamics. So it's a sort of cloth simulation, although we can use it for more than cloth. And basically what we're going to do is make sure we have our shirt highlighted. And then over here in the menu bar at the top where it says dynamics, I'm going to open that up and just drag that over to the right. We can talk about these settings. So the dynamics feature is fairly new to ZBrush. We've got that feature in maybe 2021 or 2022. So it's a fairly newish feature. What we're concerned with is more just getting this shirt to stick onto the mesh in a way and sort of behave in a more natural sort of way. I mean, if it's going to make some sort of like spandex or something like that, then this would probably work, but I'm more looking for a looser fitting shirt. So with this, I don't really want gravity turned on, although if I'm creating like maybe like a skirt or something like that, you probably want to turn gravity on. And one thing to keep in mind, this gets affected by masking. So a lot of what we're going to do here is just mask certain areas to sort of fix that in place. And then what's not masked will get affected by this. So let's say, for example, we're going to create a skirt or dress of some sorts. We can mask all of this. And then we can come into here and play around with some of this stuff. This looks pretty good. So let's just allow collision volumes. So this will just collide with things that are in the scene. And then let's just run simulation to see what that looks like. Great, so it's sort of stopped there. So the inflate might be a bit too much, so let's just bring that right down. Okay. Let's see if we can mask off a little bit less. So recalculate that. And I think that's default. All of this is default. So let's just run that. See that it sort of drags down a little bit, and I think we might bring this even lower. So let's make that 0.01. Let's recalculate. Maybe let's increase the expand. You can sort of see that expand and just push down. Oops. As soon as you press something, it sort of stops. So let's just run that again. So this could be like a little skirt or some sorts. And then it ends up being more like a dress. Okay, so there's a lot of work, so you probably need to smooth a lot of parts out. But you can sort of see that we're getting a starting point of like some sort of clothing. A lot of these settings you do need to just play around with. Keep in mind, you can see that there's an X, Y, Z buttons here. So there's like a button within a button. You can toggle these on and off. So right now I just have Z turned on. You can see that's only working in the back to front. Right. So if I can expand on the Y only, see what that looks like. It's just going to sort of drag downwards. It'll give us more of a normal dress looking thing, and that could be a good starting point to work with. So you could run a ZRemesher. That'll be a solid starting point. So what we're going to do is not that. So we're not going to create a dress. We're going to create a sort of t-shirt. So I'm going to turn expand off and contract. So I want it to sort of contract back to the the model, and then sort of keep it a little bit looser. So I don't really want gravity turned on, so I don't want it to droop down. And I'm going to turn contract on, but turn off maybe X and Y. Maybe have X turned on, we'll see. And then let's just recalculate this and see how that sort of looks. Great, so it sort of stuck itself on a little bit. And then what we can do is I'll probably Control Z that, and I can bring the firmness all the way down and the strength down as well. Let's try that again. Okay, so I'm not going to run it for the whole thing. But what I want to do is sort of get it to be a bit more tighter and closer to the body in a way. So what you can do is just move things around like this and then run the simulation again. If we want to turn on gravity at this point, so I might Control Z back here. And it's all about experimenting, so I'm going to maybe have X turned on, recalculate. So that sort of shrinks it up a bit, so maybe you don't want to do that. Let's see what Y does. Okay, so maybe none of those. And then let's recalculate that. Okay. So from here, what we can do is isolate certain areas if we want it to be a little bit looser. So we can sort of, let's say for example, down here, if we wanted to make that a little bit more looser, we can isolate all of this and then press Control, tap in this on the mesh to sort of smooth it out, and then have gravity turned on, but keep that a little bit lower. Just allow that to sort of drag down a bit. I think gravity was a bit too high, so I'm going to bring that down, recalculate. Just let that sort of fall a bit more naturally. Keep in mind it's a bit thin at the moment, so we're going to thicken that out a bit more later. So I might increase the strength of that gravity a little bit more. So maybe 1 seemed to be pretty good. So 1's even a bit too much. So let's go 0.8. Maybe 0.5. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So we can run this simulation in certain areas, like I said. So let's run it up here. Maybe perhaps we hold this area a bit. And I might change my masking to a lasso. So I can grab just this area here. And then let's see if we can sort of pull some of these areas down a bit. Right, so kind of want to maybe do something like this, and we'll soften that out a bit. But it's a bit too strong, the gravity, so let's just bring that to 0.1 perhaps. Just a little bit loose, so I don't want it too big. Okay, and that's a pretty good starting point, I think. So from here, we can use some of the cloth brushes. So that's B, C, and you can see that there's all these sort of cloth brushes that we can work with. Now, a lot of them are quite odd to sort of work with, and they work with the current settings from your they work with the current settings on your dynamics, a lot of them anyways. So let's just get into some of them. I do find though, at least with my little experience with this, that you only really want to use a couple of them. So let's just press B, C, and cloth nudge seems to work pretty well here. So if I bring this up, you can sort of just move things around a little bit. Right. B, C, fold. You can sort of, no, fold's not good. Pull, I think it was. You can sort of pull things around like that. And again, it sort of works with this, I believe. But we can sort of nudge and pull things around. So I'm going to go back to my nudge brush. And I'm going to bring up a reference for this. And the reference is just like, I just went to Kmart and just looked at the men's tops and brought up a picture. And I'm just going to try my best to get something similar. Right, so we can sort of nudge things around to get like a bit of a fold going in some areas. Loosen the shirt up a little bit. And just put some folds in areas where there probably will be some. And if you feel like you need to subdivide at this point, go ahead, just press Ctrl D. I'm not too concerned about this part here where it's sort of penetrating through, because I know I'm going to smooth that out or push that out anyways, because we're going to add some thickness to this. And don't worry about this sort of this part here that looks a bit fuzzy. What's happening there is that it's running the simulation through the brush, and it's sort of, in a way, it's not too accurate, right? So the resolution is not too high, and the resolution on the mesh is not too high, so it's going to have this sort of look. But that's easy enough to smooth out just by using a smooth brush. So I don't want this effect to be so noticeable. Right? And I feel like most these sort of brushes give you quite a dramatic effect and look. And you end up manually sculpting that in anyways. So I'm smoothing some of this out, especially the lumpy parts. And then I'm just going to move to my move brush and just fix some of these areas up. So I want this to come up a bit more. Don't want it to be so tight like this. So I'm going to pull that off and down. Same with back here, just pull that down a little bit. Shirt's getting a bit too wrinkly, so I'm just going to smooth these parts down a bit. Okay, let's just move some of these parts out. Open this up a bit. So tight around here. Cool. And then if we want to control the any particular wrinkles, we can use the standard brush and the damn standard in combination. So I think before I do that, actually, I want to maybe make this feel a little bit looser. Like it's a bit too tight on the body, and I was thinking something a little bit more relaxed. Okay, let's smooth some of that out. Great. So we can use a standard brush. Might take symmetry off at this point, and we can just use a larger brush size and just paint in some of these folds. And then we can use the dam standard to cut under them to make that fold feel a bit more like it's folding towards one side. And then on the other side, I'm just going to smooth that out a little bit. And that gives a nice sort of fold-like effect. Right, so standard brush, sort of brush somewhere like this. Hit one side with the standard dam standard, and then smooth the opposite side to make that sort of look like it's folding over. So you can go as far as you want with this. Right towards the end, what you can do is then go into your geometry tab and then dynamic subdiv. So we can add a dynamic subdiv here. And then there is a thickness tab, which this just allows you to have much more control over the thickness. Wondering why it's not working. Let's see. There we go. Let's bring that down a bit. So something like that. And these edges, we can smooth them off as well. Right, so increase the smoothing of these edges. It's one of these guys. Oops. Turn that one off. Great, so you've got a nice simple shirt. What's cool about the subdiv is that you can just leave it and you can just continue sort of sculpting and it will sort of stay there. So we can work on like some stitching if we wanted to get some of this stitching in. Might need to subdivide. So I'll turn that off now. Just subdivide again, maybe twice. You can start working on your stitching. Right, if you need to, what you can do is add a lazy mouse. So in transform, and if you go down towards somewhere around here, thought lazy mouse was here, but maybe it's in tools. No, it's in stroke. That's right. So stroke, lazy mouse, and we can increase the lazy steps. That will basically allow us to draw straight lines. Now we're drawing in dots here, so we can change that to freehand, and it'll give us a more less dotted effect, but here it's still giving us that. So we might go back to dots and then go back to our stroke types, and then over here we can reduce the stroke count or increase it. I can't quite remember. Let's see. Modifiers, mass average. So maybe it wasn't that, maybe it's mass average. Let's one of these guys to allow it to sort of not be dotty like that. Let's see. It's in stroke somewhere. You might need to work that out on your own. But it's one of these guys. Can't quite remember exactly where it was. As soon as I stop the video, I will find it though. Like always. But it was in... thought it was in here. Change that back to 8. Okay, I got that wrong. So the lazy steps need to be down, lazy radius needs to be up. So let's increase that. You can see we can draw straight lines here. And this is where you can draw like your shirt stitchings and things like that. Okay, so this area that didn't quite meet up, just fill that out with a clay buildup. And it's just a matter of smoothing that area out like that. If you need to, you can go over the top of that with your pinch brush. Let's increase the intensity to sort of bring these together a bit more. To get more of a tighter look. It's a bit too far there. Okay, so another stitching will be around here. I'll use a smaller brush. Go over the top of a pinch. And you can see we can get a nice sort of effect like that. Probably should have done it to the other side. Okay, and you can apply your thickness to the shirt, and then that's pretty much it. So if you want to layer the effect, it's simply going through the same thing. So if I wanted to add a jacket over the top of this, I would copy the base mesh, sort of draw out or map out that jacket, and then go through a process of isolating it, deleting parts that are hidden, and then smoothing the edges off. Right. If you're going for like a jacket that has bits that sort of stick out, like maybe it's like a bit that's sort of folded, so like a collar of some sorts, that's a little bit trickier. What you could do in that case is work out using ZModeler. ZModeler is a bit tricky to work with because it's not very, ZBrush is very unconventional in how it works, and ZModeler is even more so. So that's a little tricky. But a hacky sort of way to sort of get things to be in the shape that you want it to be is to just run a Z remesher. So remember what I said before, if you were to change the shape or something. So if this is going to be like a collar of some sort, so if I press X and bring this up, I can run a Z remesher and it will sort of adapt that to the new topology. Right? And I can continue sort of pushing and pulling, running Z remesher. Maybe AccuCurve will be really good here. AccuCurve, you can find that in Brush, Curve, AccuCurve. Just gives you more of a pinchier curve, pinchier grab to work with. So a bit of a hacky approach, but this should work. Z remesh, and then you just continue to sort of pull this into shape. At this point, you could probably work with a mask as well. That might be quite helpful. I'll go back to the brush. Oops. And let's see how that looks. Might need to inflate some of these areas. Maybe not that much. You can see we could sort of hack that together if you were to sort of come in here with a damn standard underneath. You could easily get that look, but you'd probably be relying a lot on your damn standard, so your Z remesher to get that look the way that you want it to. It's a little bit hacky. I'll say that's, as a new modeler, that will, or new sculptor, that will probably be the easiest way to do it. But if you want to learn Z modeler, it's BZM, and that's how you can sort of manipulate polygons on the mesh, where you can somewhat extrude. You can press spacebar and it gives you an option. Let's say Q mesh, poly loop, and then we want to extrude, poly loop, and one-sided. So it allows us to sort of extrude bits out like that, which if you manage to, you can try to extrude out a collar, but I would sort of just do it this way. With a bit of, you wouldn't be starting off with a cylinder, you would start off with more like a shirt. It'll be a lot easier that way. But yeah, so I hope that helped anyways to get a shirt, at the very least. To get simple sort of clothing, it's fairly simple to get something like this going. And if you wanted to get some pants, or even a skirt or some sorts, then that's fairly simple. Or even like simple clothing on the head, like a beanie or like a hat or some sorts. It's more or less the same process, just geared towards the thing that you're trying to make.